right. Good evening. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll call to order the November 26th meeting of the Bristol, Virginia City Council. Please join me in a moment of silence. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we've changed the order of our agenda a little bit, so the first thing we're going to do before we jump into anything is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes we need to make?
Yes, I would move that we adopt the agenda with the exceptions of items 3 and 5. We would postpone those items.
Okay, so you have a motion to adopt the agenda but remove items number 3 and 5. Looking for a second.
Second.
All right, so a motion from Mr. Farnham and second from Mr. Hartley. Please call the roll.
Farnham.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes. All right, council comments. Does anyone have anything they'd like to discuss before we get going?
Just like to remind people, the upcoming holiday season, there's a lot of events downtown with Small Business Saturday coming this weekend. Next weekend, or next Monday's the Christmas tree lighting, and then next Thursday will be the Christmas parade. So lots of opportunities to come downtown and celebrate as a community.
Thank you. And I've got a couple things I'd like to just talk about briefly. On Friday, down at the Birthplace of Country Music office, we had an unveiling of a Jimmy Rogers monument that was a joint effort between the BCM and Visit Mississippi through their Mississippi Music Trail. And we had a good turnout. Marty Stewart was there, and it was a good event for the city. So I appreciate everyone who came out. I know some people that were here were also there and had good coverage in the press. And it's good to have communication with other cities who can help you as far as tourism and promotion of your city. The other thing that I wanted to just mention briefly last week is a lot of you saw we had an unspecified threat to one of our schools from one of our students. And I just want to commend the work of the school system for getting the word out like they did, and especially the work of our public safety officers, our police and firefighters, and other agencies that were involved in tracking down the source of the threat and handling it quickly and without any kind of incident. So I appreciate everything they did there. City manager's comments.
Council and to the public, I want to say, if you haven't heard the news, last Friday, Hard Rock International agreed to be a partner with the Bristol Resort and Casino project. I don't know if people realize how big of a deal that is, but that's huge. Hard Rock International is a world recognized restaurant and entertainment industry, and for us to be able at one point here in the future to be able to put our name on their website is something we should be proud of. They saw something in Bristol that other companies have not seen, and now I think other companies will have to take a look as if Hard Rock sees something in Bristol, what have we missed? And I think it's something that we can build on for economic development.
Thank you very much. Matters to be presented by members of the public for non-agenda items. And so I see we have several people who are signed up for non-agenda items. So basically what will happen when you come up, state your name and where you live, and there'll be a little light on that podium that'll turn green to tell you have 3 minutes. When you're almost out of time, it'll go yellow, and when you're out of time, it'll go red. So if you'll kind of be cognizant of that, I would appreciate it. First person signed up for non-agenda is John Pierce.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'll try very hard to not take the full 3 minutes. Again, my name is John Pierce. I live at 55 Brookdale Circle. And I'm here today because I understand that the council is going to be voting on the Second Amendment Sanctuary Resolution at the December 10th meeting. However, there will not be public comment there. So myself and a number of other people thought we'd come today and speak very briefly in favor of the resolution. Just very briefly, for those of you that perhaps haven't looked at the resolution, it asks nothing that the oath of office that each of you have taken already binds you to. It specifically says that the city will not enforce any unconstitutional laws. And it specifically puts the rights of the citizens of Bristol on par with those of the other surrounding counties. We're seeing literally a tsunami of Second Amendment resolutions being passed across southwestern Virginia. I don't know how many of you have seen the map that has been circulating on social media. Wythe County passed it unanimously. I believe it was last night. And every other county in southwestern Virginia has already passed it or is on the verge of passing it. Washington County is getting ready to start their meeting at 6:30 tonight. We fully anticipate it to pass there. And so, since, again, we won't have public comment on the 10th, we certainly will have some attendance to watch the vote. But we wanted to come out, and I'm sure other people are going to speak as well, in favor of it. Again, I would ask the council's support on that. I would ask the council to read it very carefully and note what it is doing in terms of protecting the rights of the citizens. But more importantly, what it's really doing is it's sending a message that the people of southwestern Virginia and their heritage of hunting and sportsmanship are important, and they're as important as the votes from Northern Virginia. They're as important as the votes from Tidewater that have greater population density. We're not second-class citizens of the Commonwealth. And by passing such a resolution, the primary thing that it will do is it will encourage the incoming legislature that have many things they want to accomplish for the Commonwealth, not to focus on infringing on the rights of the citizens of the rural parts of Virginia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next person is Gary Widener.
I'm Gary Widener. I live at 40 Ventura. No, I don't. I moved recently. I live at 40 Brookdale Circle, Bristol, Virginia. When I took my oath as I went into the military, I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And as you took your oath, it means the same thing as the oath I took, that you will defend the Constitution. And I would ask that you would vote this resolution in, that we can continue to protect ourselves, we can continue to protect against a tyrannical government, which is what the Second Amendment is all about. And I would ask you to please vote yes on this and pass it, that the people of Southwest Virginia can still enjoy the hunting and all the shooting sports that we do. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next person is Linda Mann.
Hi, I'm Linda Mann. I live at 65 Brookdale Circle, and I just asked you to please consider strongly allowing Bristol, Virginia to be a sanctuary city for the Second Amendment rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Matt Jesse.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Jesse, 168 Elbert Way. I'm here in favor of the Second Amendment sanctuary. As John had mentioned, part of the duty of the local as well as state government is to uphold the Constitution. And I see additional infringements upon it as being against what the Constitution stands for. So I strongly urge the council to vote in favor of the sanctuary status. And that's all I've got.
All right, thank you very much. Don Waterman.
I'm Don Waterman, 201 Millsap Street, Unit Number 7, Bristol, Virginia. I'm in favor also of the Second Amendment Sanctuary City Resolution. Basically, there's a lot of talk going around about a socialist state. Well, how do you get a socialist state? Well, the creator of that idea was named Saul Alinsky. And basically, there are 8 things that you do to have a socialist state. One is health care. Control health care, you control the people. Next, poverty. Increase the poverty level as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control and will not fight back if you are providing everything for them to live. Debt. Increase debt to an unsustainable level. That way you're able to increase taxes, and this will produce more poverty. Welfare. Take control of every aspect of their lives, food, housing, income, and you have total control of everyone else. Education. Take control of what people read and listen to, and take control of what children learn in school. For instance, in this case, common care. Religion. Remove the belief of God from government and the schools. And we saw a little example of that at the opening of this meeting. Class warfare. Divide the people into the wealthy and the poor. This will cause more discontent, and they'll be easier to tax the wealthy with the support of the poor. And finally, gun control. Remove people's ability to defend themselves from the government. That way you are able to create a police state. It's as simple as this, guys. Some of these gun control things that they're talking about doing are silly. A lot of these guys don't even know what an AR-15 is. They don't even understand what a semi-automatic handgun is. But they're making rules to ban these type of guns. And, you know, and if they can put 10 rounds in a gun and the guy's any kind of shot at all, he'll be able to pretty well take care of things. Anyway, this is How to Create a Socialist State by Saul Alinsky. He died in 1975, and I'm a member of the Republican Party of Bristol, Virginia, as well as the Southwest Virginia Tea Party, and we don't believe in any of these things. So I just thought I'd let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, into the regular agenda. First item is item 1, a public hearing on a school facility financing plan. Going to go ahead and open the hearing. Staff comments.
Council, this is for the public hearing on school financing. This has been a discussion since May of 2017. Tonight's hearing is a discussion to determine if people have any concerns about the financing plan through the PPEA model, well, to the tune of roughly $18.6 million to finance a new school that the school board has decided on a location, which would be at Van Pelt.
All right, thank you. So we're going to go to public comments, and we've got a couple people signed up. First person is Don Ashley.
Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor and City Council, City Manager and staff. I'm Don Ashley, 709 Navajo Trail, Bristol, Virginia. Thank you for letting me talk tonight. As you know, over the past year, the school board and City Council have been locked in discussions about a new school. They spent many hours researching alternatives. You all have asked them to go back and actually get more alternatives, which they did. They have presented you with much detailed information probably as much information as they can come up with. This issue has been discussed at great length, as you know. After a year of studying, they have concluded that the original PPEA plan that they presented to you a year ago is still the best choice, and that is what they're recommending. I urge you to approve the PPEA plan because many reasons have changed because of the last, say, year. As you know, this plan will require little or no taxpayer money. As you know, this plan is being basically at the risk of J.A. Street. This company is an outstanding company. If you look at the website for the school board and read the 200-page document that they have, you'll be very impressed with J.A. Street and his ability to deliver the goods. He can. And as you know, this location at Van Pelt is basically going to have one campus for our elementary grades, K through 2 and then 3, 4, 5. You'll have one location for elementary school. As you know, we have one location for our high school. We have one location for our middle school. Another reason that's very favorably and something that's changed between a year ago and today is the interest rate. Believe it or not, our interest rate is better now than it was a year ago. As you know, the city's finances is stronger than it was a year ago. Davenport, your auditors, your credit bond rating, things have improved over the past year. It's more favorable now to do this than it was a year ago. And the year that you've had going back and forth in discussions and looking at different alternatives has been very beneficial because you've gained much more information. I cannot imagine another issue that's been discussed as much as this has. And congratulations. I think you've uncovered a lot of rocks, and I think we're at the point now where you have a solid plan. I urge you to approve this plan, and I think it's time for the school board and J.A. Street to get to work. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right. Next person is Ginger Fleener.
My name is Ginger Fleener. I live on Sherwood Road. So, first of all, when he was talking about socialism, there was a couple of things that he had said about education and schools and everything, and it scared me half to death. Right now, as it stands, the schools we've got in our communities are doing so much more than teaching our kids. You take these schools out of our communities and you're losing grants that they're getting to take care of our kids and the kids that they go home to their families. These schools are taking care of more than what they should because of what's going on in society. Bad thing is it's going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. If you go back and you read the Bible, times are not going to get any easier. As a community, as a society, we need to start taking care of those that can't. We need to start loving one another. We need to start taking our time and giving it to somebody else. It's not right that we've got kids in situations that they can't help, but yet you want to take them all and put them up on a hill between two buildings and expect them to be okay when you've got kids that have home lives that aren't like what you had or anybody else had. From experience, when I was a little girl, my mom would go gambling on the weekends. My dad volunteered at the sheriff's department. That left me and my brother at our house on the weekends. If I had a school that took care of me the way these do this day and time, I would have been fed. If my mom wouldn't have went gambling, I would have had a family probably. If my dad would have realized what he had, I would have had a family. but because of issues that they were going through, I and my brother had to pay for. At one point in time, I was living out of a stinking cooler. No refrigerator, no oven, nothing. I know what it feels like. I know what these kids are going through. Please don't do this. Don't do this to them. If you have patience, it will get better. This is not the answer. These are our children. You've got to think more of them than what you are. This new plan is not worth it.
All right, thank you. Casey Almerode.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council members. I'm Casey Almerode, 2231 Collins Street. I'm here tonight to speak on the consolidation of our elementary schools. Last year, this was the exact same plan that was presented to you that you voted no for. I do give credit to Dr. Perigin for the work he's done to find a solution to our issues. However, this is not the solution. It was not last year, and it still is not. The events of last week should be a good reason why we should look at saying no again. None of us can say that nothing will ever happen in our schools. I pray to God it never does. But we really cannot say that. We all know our schools have accessibility and safety issues. Realistically, putting 1,100 plus students, our teachers, staff, and our administrators in one campus does not come close to being a good idea. If something were to happen, it would be a total nightmare for this city and for anybody that votes yes for this plan. We want Bristol to be known nationwide, but we want to do it for the right reasons. One of those reasons, for that very reason Mrs. Davis bought, will be featured on the Today Show in Highland View. Another reason should be because of what our kids are doing. They're doing amazing things in these buildings, and it doesn't matter where they are. We are a community, and we need to treat it that way. A lot of people are speaking out against it. We need to listen. We're not a big community like Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. We don't need a mega school. It does not matter. I've said it before. 4 walls is not what we need to worry about. It's what we put in those 4 walls. And right now, our teachers are doing a fantastic job exactly where they are in our smaller community schools. Thank you.
Ms. Marney.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Nancy Marney. I'm a resident of the city of Bristol, Virginia. I'm a property owner. I'm a product of the Bristol, Virginia school system, grades 1 through 12. Beware of false assumptions. Beware of false assumptions. There are 3 areas that I am particularly interested in, and I want them to be successful. Number 1, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Nothing works without a knowledge in those 3 areas. Nothing. No level of technology, nothing works without that. Number 2, what I refer to as the Marney 3 R's. Restructure, reorganize, redefine. And then I have added a third, which I call the 3 C's. Contemplative thinking, creative thinking, critical thinking. I'm a big believer in academic enrichment. I think if this school board and all of the officials had put the same amount of energy, interest, money, enthusiasm into academic enrichment, we would already see a difference. Every child should be reading well by the end of the 4th grade. Every child. That is not true here. every child by the 8th grade should be a pretty darn good reader. That is not true in this school system. We have everything we need to make that happen right now, today, this very day, by 7:30 tomorrow morning. It takes teachers, it takes curriculum, it takes good leadership. It is not the buildings that produce this. It is the teachers, the curriculum, the leadership. There is no excuse in the Bristol, Virginia students not being proficient. They are not stupid people. We are not a stupid community. We do not have stupid children. We may have some children with problems. Of course, we have citizens with problems. But we should be doing more with the students. We have the facilities. We have everything we need. Now, there's a big difference between a crisis situation and wants and desires, dreams. Crisis is the jail, millions of dollars. Crisis is the landfill, millions of dollars. Crisis is the city debt, which the Keystone Cops left us with, $106 to $130 million. That's crisis, folks. A new school is not a crisis situation. It is a wish. It is a want. This city cannot afford that. Put that on the burner for later on. It is not a crisis. What we need is teachers, curriculum, and good leadership. We should be able to start at 7:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, last person is Renee Hunt.
Hello, my name is Renee Hunt. I live on Jackson Lane, and I'm a homeowner. I came here tonight for the purpose of letting you know that I feel this new school at Van Pelt is not what needs to be done. First of all, I don't think it's taken into consideration the minority and the low income and setting those children up for failure in that vicinity, the area. That's not what was, the first time it was Van Pelt, and then it was going to be Washington Lee remodeled. But Bristol, Virginia can't afford that. And I don't think we need a new school, but I don't think if y'all decide to do a school that it needs to be there. You, Mayor, spoke of the recent occurrence with the threat at the school. You're putting all the eggs in one basket, and that basket drops. That's it. You're putting all the children in one facility, one area. A shooter goes in there. Those are elementary school kids. Yes, we have one high school and one junior high, but those children are older and know to hide, know to run, know to seek protection. Your elementary school children don't know that. And I feel that it doesn't need to happen. We do not need a new school built with all the elementary children in one basket. Thank you.
All right, that's the last person that signed up for public comment. I just want to say a couple things before we close this. It's very irresponsible to tie the threat of a school shooting to the discussion of a financing plan. We have one middle school, we have one high school. It's irresponsible to bring that up. There's no equivalency here. So shame on you, both of you. As far as the other comments, this is a public hearing on financing. So if you have concerns with the site, I would recommend you address those to the school board. They're the ones who pick the site. They're the ones who make the decision on the site. We make a decision on financing. Public hearing closed. Item 2, public hearing on proposed charter changes. Hearing is open. Staff comments.
Council, this is a public hearing on some proposed charter changes in regards to a provision in our charter where a city manager has to seek consent of council prior to the hiring or firing of a department head. Outside counsel, I want to say first and foremost, this was not my idea. I did not bring this up. I know there's things going on social media that are accusing me of things that are not true. I did not bring this up. This was strictly outside counsel's advice that this be changed, that council members not be so involved in regards to the decisions of personnel matters in the city. I could care one less as to whether or not you all pass this charter change or not. It is not my goal to have all-encompassing power over the city. That is not my goal whatsoever. This is a liability issue that outside counsel advised us of. I've spoke to each one of you in regards to this, and I believe each one of you did not have voice any concerns to me about this, and that's why it's on the agenda tonight. So this is the purpose for that public hearing.
All right, public comments, Ms. Marnie.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Nancy Marnie. I'm a resident of the city of Bristol, Virginia. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a property owner. I think the charter should be left alone. There was great thought given to putting that charter together. There were very good, legitimate, valid reasons for why it was written as it is. I think it is a mistake to put all of the administrative power into the hands of one person. The United States government is not structured that way, and rightfully so, and neither is the state of Virginia. I think this council is, I know this council is the ultimate decision maker in the city of Bristol, Virginia. This council sits above the city manager. And I think that the city manager should have to be accountable, whoever it is. Now, we've had several city managers in fairly recent years who had no business being the city manager of the city of Bristol, Virginia. They had no business whatsoever. Now, they could have done and did irreparable damage to this city. And in my opinion, the city manager, whoever it is, there are changes made. Lord, we've had several city managers in the last 20 years. But they should be accountable to somebody for their actions. You can call it micromanage. A rose by any other name is a rose. But whoever is the city manager should be accountable to the council. The council will change. We know that. And having the stability of the charter will keep that from becoming a power base. That happens, you know. I've seen it in this city. Oh my, it's a mess when that happens. When we had the Keystone Cops, well, we're in debt till the year 2042 if we don't spend another nickel beyond this minute. You can thank the Keystone Cops for that. They did it. I was here. I know who did it. I know I could give you a list. I won't, but I could. And it's the same way with whoever is the city manager. We don't know. We've had several city managers in the last 20 years. But the point is the charter adds some stability and some form and structure for us to follow. This council needs to stiffen its backbone, step up to the plate, and take charge.
Thank you very much. Next person for item 2 is Don Waterman.
I'm Don Waterman, 201 Millsap Street, number 7, Bristol, Virginia, as well as some other properties in the city. But the reason I wanted to speak on this is changing this charter should be a no-brainer, should never be even thought of. You guys are elected to office, and if we don't like what you're doing, we can remove you. And we have done so in the past. So, in other words, not anything against Mr. Eads, but you remember Dewey Cashwell, and I don't need to say much more than that. And could you have, if he'd have been totally in charge of hiring and firing, you think anything would have come out about the situation that came down during that period of time? Probably not. So leave the things the way they were. The people that wrote that knew what they were doing. They were giving you the final responsibility for hiring and firing. And I'm not sure who made the recommendation to Mr. Eads for doing this, but it's dead wrong. It should never be considered, period. So you have the responsibility for governing the city and hiring and firing individuals. And if you can't get along with them, then you have the responsibility to get rid of them. So I would vote no as far as the changing of the charter. It's worked all these years, and I'm sure it'll work a few more years. And I appreciate you letting me have the opportunity to talk to you about it, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. No one else has signed up for public comment, so close public hearing. Item 3 has been postponed. So item 4 is resolution granting approval of special exception 05-2019 for a barber shop in an R2 district at 20 Peters Street. Staff report.
Mayor and council, this is, as the mayor said, a resolution that follows the Planning Commission recommendation and the joint public hearing that was held on November 12th on this application. It is 20 Peters Street, which is zoned at that location. The lot is zoned R2, which allows generally just residential, single and two-family residential, and the proposed use of the existing structure there is a barber shop. We do have some slides to refresh your memory from the public hearing there. This is the structure that's on the property. It's actually two small lots, about 2/10 to 3/10 of an acre in size. And the zoning of the area, this lot, or combination of 3 lots, is right at the corner of Peters Street and Kings Mountain Alley. And as you can see, just across the alley is the B3 zoning that is the block over on West State Street. And the surrounding property is vacant or vacant tracts, and across the street is a empty parking lot, basically. Closest residence are these 2 homes right here. Planning Commission met after the public hearing, and on the 18th, their recommendation to you all is to approve the special exception application with 2 conditions. And those, we'll speak to that in just a minute, but what's on your agenda, of course, is the resolution to accept that recommendation or not. This is a view of the back of the house where the parking area would be located. And the design of the parking area is really up to our engineering staff, what's best that the applicant will need to work with them on following approval of a special exception. Those are just some inside pictures of the home. And so the Planning Commission recommendation is to approve the special exception with these 2 conditions. The required parking spaces will be paved, and the signage will be non-illuminated except for the installation of a lighted barber pole, and it shall comply with the size allowances already in the City Code Section 50-243. And that's what is stated in the drafted resolution. Be glad to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Public comment. We have one person, that's Ms. Marnie.
Mayor, members of council. My name is Nancy Marney. I'm a resident of the city of Bristol, Virginia. I'm a taxpayer. I spoke when we had the first public hearing on this issue. I have also been a member of the Planning Commission. I know how that works. I know a whole lot about how it works. I know a whole lot about how this city works, and it is not all good. There are shenanigans going on behind the scenes that should be stopped now, right this minute. Shenanigans. Maybe not illegal, but walking a fine line. They're not nice and they're not good. Now, that said, one of my big points, and I have never wavered on this issue all through the years, the biggest investment most people make in a lifetime is in buying a home. That's the biggest investment most people ever make. Now, if they buy a home in a residential area, and then this council and planning commission come along and make all these exceptions, they're going to destroy that. It's not worth what it was. It's not the quality it used to be. The neighborhood's gone. If one barber shop opened up in my neighborhood, and then another one was requested up the street, and then a beauty parlor was requested over here, and then somebody wanted to open up a pest control office over here, all with special exceptions, the neighborhood would be gone. It would be destroyed. The quality of life is gone. The neighborhood is gone. It is no longer what it was intended to be. It was no longer what people thought it was going to be when they invested the most money in their life in that home. I think it's very sad, quite frankly. Quite frankly. That doesn't mean that zoning can't change, but there's too often frivolous reasons for changing zones. It makes no sense. You don't look beyond the end of your nose. There's no concerted thinking, critical thinking. What if? What if? Well, let's look at this. How is this going to affect this, this, and this? None of that happens. It's just all knee-jerk reaction. I object to that. I'm a citizen. I don't want my money spent that way. I don't want to live in a city that's run that way. And that's what's happening. You all are getting the same line of reasoning the Keystone Cops had, and it's leading us right straight back into $130 million worth of debt. 106 if you want to look at it a different way. That's where we're headed. Stupid. $700,000 for 2 pizza places? Come on, people. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Reading of the resolution.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Bristol, Virginia, granting a special exception, SE number 05-2019, to map parcel numbers 34-3-40B, 34-3-41B, 34-3-42B, 20 Peters Street in Bristol, Virginia, to allow a barber shop. Section 1, the City Council finds that whereas the Community Development Department received an application for a special exception from Clayton Harlow for the operation of a barber shop at 20 Peters Street, map parcels numbers 34-3-40B, 34-3-41B, and 34-3-42B, and whereas the applicant submitted the required application to the Director of Community Development in accordance with City Code, and whereas a joint public hearing has been properly advertised and held on November 12, 2019, in accordance with the Code of Virginia, Section 15.2-2204 as amended, and whereas property owners adjoining 20 Peters Street, Bristol, Virginia, have been properly notified pursuant to Virginia Code Section 15.2-2204 as amended, and whereas the Planning Commission of Bristol, Virginia met on November 18, 2019, and recommended approval of the special exception with 2 stated conditions, and whereas the City Council of Bristol, Virginia reserves unto itself the right to grant special exception permits, and whereas the City Council considered the circumstances of Bristol, Virginia City Code Section 50-39G prior to approval of the special exception request Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of Bristol, Virginia, Section 2, Special Exception Number 05-2019 is hereby granted with the following conditions. The required parking spaces will be paved and signage will be non-illuminated except for the installation of a lighted barber pole and comply with the size allowances found in Section 50-243 of the City Code, passed and adopted by City Council of the City of Bristol, Virginia at a regularly scheduled meeting of said council held on the 26th day of November 2019.
All right, thank you. Looking for a motion and a second to take action on this.
I move that we approve the special exception with the two conditions as stated by the, recommended by the Planning Commission regarding the parking and signage.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Farnham and second by Mr. Hartley. Council discussion.
Well, I'll start this. This right here is a prime example of why you look at the city map and its zones throughout the city. We're just dotted everywhere because nobody has really taken the time to ask the questions, where do we want our businesses, what kind of businesses, and the zonings, and where do we want them? So when you look at the map, it's because of special exemptions that give us the polka dot look that we have in our map. So the Planning Commission started 2.5 years ago, roughly, give or take a couple of months, on how to fix that. And we're fixing to have a joint meeting, and it's all in there. It's taken forever to get that to City Council, but for whatever reasons, that is where we're at. I am a huge advocate of businesses, small businesses, but I can't sign on to this one simply because it is truly a neighborhood, and this street infrastructure is not designed to operate businesses on them coming and going. The property owner and business says that they want to put 2 stalls in, two seats. Okay, but if you're in business, you have to have a growth mentality to stay in business. So they may, for a year or so, get along just fine with 3 parking spots, but sooner or later, if this business continues to grow, they are going to be a negative impact on this small community. Miss Nancy is exactly right. It does not matter what income level someone is, their house is their biggest asset that they own. And this neighborhood right here, to do this one structure is not really adequate. There is buildings all over this city that are sitting vacant that is zoned to open up a barber shop tomorrow morning. And I believe that we need to start filling some of our vacant properties. That's a good looking house. He would have no problem renting that. We have a shortage of rental properties in this city. So I'm of the mindset that this particular piece of property needs to stay a rental property, not business. And business of that type right there needs to occupy a vacant building that we currently have in this city. And the special exemptions truly do need to stop in this city. We need to figure out what we're doing. Who do we want to be? How do we want to do it? And let's get it put together and move this city forward with everybody on the same page.
Well, I made the motion, so I'll have a few comments. I know there's a few different ways to look at every issue. I definitely understand what you're saying, Ms. Marty. I know we've talked a lot. I've heard Bill talk a lot about how we need to work on the zoning map so we don't have so many special exemptions, which we have some, and ultimately we want uniformity, so there's not as many. My first thought on this, I guess, could we go back to the map of the zoning map where it showed residential and business? My first thought was, okay, where is this? And when I looked at it, I saw it's adjoining a business zone already, about a block off of West State Street. So my first thought was, it's not someone coming to open up a factory in the middle of a residential district with houses all around it. So that kind of put me at ease a little bit, where I saw it was just one block off of State Street, already adjoining a business district. My thoughts there about, if they do what they need to do with the parking, if a business was operating in there, a barber shop, would that hurt people's property values around it? I can't necessarily say no. I can't necessarily say yes. I don't think it would have a huge effect either way. So that's why I made the motion. I don't see an issue with it.
So correct me if I'm wrong. As we can see on this map, it borders the B3 zone. It's right up against a parts store. There's church parking next to it on one side. And
Across the alley is a big church, parking lot for the church.
then it's got vacant lots on the other side and technically behind it.
Yes,
So it's not right up against, and then there's a street separating it from someone's house,
yes.
from actual houses, okay. I mean, like the planning commission has said, I think that, the parking needs to be addressed because they're working with very limited space back there. So, I mean, they need to be thinking about that and how they're going to put it in correctly. But, I mean, aside from that, it's not sitting in the middle of Meadowcrest, or it's not, sitting in the middle of Euclid Avenue up next to Virginia Middle School. It's not in a fully residential area.
Yeah, and one other thing to point out is the applicant, it will be continuing the residential use. He will be living in the house.
Yeah, and so see, I see no real issue with it. I mean, it's, I applaud them for wanting to open a small business, in the community. I think that's great. So I see no issue with it, so.
Mr. Mayor, may I add something? I may know some things you all don't know. May I add something to this discussion?
I'm gonna give you 3 minutes. But it's a hard 3 minutes. That red light comes on, the thing self-destructs.
After all, this is the future of the city we're talking about here. This isn't just a Sunday day feast.
That self-destruct costs like $2 million, so be careful, please.
Do what?
I say the self-destruct in that podium costs $2 million, so please be careful.
My knee could do a good job with this. My name again is Nancy Marney. I'm a resident of the city of Bristol. I'm a property owner. This zoning map that Mr. Wingard referred to, the zoning itself was dealt with several years back. I know this for a fact. The zoning was established. The zoning was very carefully studied and laid out for residential and business, and there was a little bit of a buffer zone and so forth. This was already done, folks, but it has gradually been chipped away and chipped away and chipped away with issues just like this. Of course it makes a difference. Do you think I want to sit on my front porch and look across the street and see a barber pole? You're crazy. Do you think I want to look down the street at a 5-bedroom house that's for sale right now and see a thrift shop in one part of it and a barber shop in the other part? I think not. Of course it'll make a difference. What are you all talking about, people? What are you used to? What do you aspire to? Are you willing to live in mediocrity and wallow in the mud with the pigs just for a $1 or $2, or to say, well, it won't make any difference? Of course it makes a difference. When you have people that have become successful in every way, they're not going to live in a $40,000 house. That isn't the way that works, people. And people who don't want that lifestyle are going to go where they can get a lifestyle they want. And it is not sitting on your porch looking at a barber pole, even if it's a block or two away. That is not the lifestyle. And that comes into this quality of life. What do you want? What do you expect? What can you afford? And why? And then if you put your money into something over here thinking, I have finally achieved everything I've worked so hard for, and the next morning you get up and there's a barber pole across the street. Come on, people. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So one thing I will add, just kind of to hopefully alleviate some of your concerns, there is a difference in the area of town that you live in and the area of town that this is, because this butts right up against a business district. And I'm going to read you this. This is from the staff analysis. It says, the future land use map, which is part of the comprehensive plan, indicates most of the corridor of West State Street at this location to be local commercial, which includes retail facilities that provide goods and services for local customers as opposed to interstate-oriented businesses. So this is part of the future land use map, and this is kind of the direction that West State Street is going, I believe, in the next several years.
But that was changed by people who had no business messing with it. I know, I was here when it was done. They didn't know what they were doing. It was a selfish, self-centered change. I know what was going on, Mr. Mayor, and we don't have to perpetuate that. It can stop right here tonight.
I can't speak to what happened in the past because I wasn't here, but this is what we're, I know, but this is what we're working with, and I know we're meeting with the Planning Commission to go further into having an actual good conjoined plan on what we're supposed to do, but this is what we're working with at this point. And it does make sense.
I stood up here 2 times.
I know.
That's what we're working with.
And it does,
You're not working with it.
in my opinion, and it appears we have a difference of opinion, West State Street is a good place for businesses. And this is close enough to a business district that I would say that it's a good place for a business.
I would,
You better be glad you don't have your money invested in a house out there.
I would say at least Mr. Harlow does
Council,
have
could
his
we
money
take a
invested in the
recess
house.
for a few minutes here?
before,
You
can I
wanna do
say
this right now?
one thing just to throw that out there because we brought it up? I definitely understand what you're saying, Miss Marty. I definitely understand what you're saying, Miss Marty, about, well, you mentioned the beautiful 5-bedroom house that's for sale across the street from you, that 627 Euclid Avenue. Yes, I've been in that house. It's beautiful. If someone wanted to come and apply for a special exemption and open up a pawn shop or something right there, I'd vote no for that because I feel like it's in the...
I will be the first one down here with the lawyer to get you off this council.
No, I'd vote no for no pawn shop there at that house. No, no. I'd vote no to approve that special exemption because it's a beautiful house, residential neighborhood. I don't think there's...
Let's take a recess.
Let's take a 10-minute recess. All right, we're back. So we're still on item 4, which is the resolution for the special exception. We completed the discussion, I believe, ad nauseum, so if the clerk would call the roll.
Farnham.
Yes.
Mumpower.
No.
Wingard.
No.
Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes. All right, so our next item is item 6, which is presentation of FY2020 first quarter financial information. Before we get into that, I would like to say something. A minute ago, we were doing public comment on the school financing, and a couple people said some things that I disagreed with, so I talked to them in the recess, and I told them in person, but I'm going to tell them now, I'm sorry for offending you. It hit me the wrong way. And I'm sure what I said hit you all the wrong way, so I'm sorry. So there's that, and we can talk more after if you'd like to. Item 6, first quarter financial information.
Mayor and members of council, this is the finance update for the first quarter of fiscal year 20, data as of September 30th, 2019. We will be discussing revenues and expenditures as of September 30th, 2019. This data is prepared on the cash basis, revenues the city has received, and expenditures the city has paid. This is unaudited data. The general fund summary with a budget of $54.9 million, revenues were $11.2 million, 20% of budgeted revenue, expenditures were $14.3 million, 26% of budget, for a fund deficit of $3.1 million. It is not unusual for the city general fund to be at a deficit until we get closer to the December 5th tax date. That's not unusual. Solid waste disposal fund summary with a budget of $7.8 million. Revenues were at $2.3 million, 30% of budget. Expenditures were at $1.7 million, or 22% of budget. The capital projects fund summary, revenues of $1.2 million. Expenditures of $1 million for a surplus in that fund of $194,000, and our transit fund revenues of $217,000, expenditures of $101,000, for a balance of surplus at first quarter of $115,000. Here is the general fund revenue summary. Of the $11 million received by the general fund, $6.3 million is from local sources. Revenue from the Commonwealth, $4.1 million. Federal revenues were $779,000. Other financing sources, $10,000, making up our total revenues general fund received of $11.2 million. This is what our general fund revenue looks like. The blue is our local revenue at 56% of the general fund revenues received. Local revenues make up 66% of our general fund budget. The local piece of this, the blue piece of this graph, will grow as we approach our tax deadline. The red is our state revenue at 37% of general fund revenues. State revenues make up 28% of our general fund budget. The green is our federal revenue at 7%, and 7% of federal revenues, make up 7% of our general fund budget. And other financing sources is less than 1% of our general fund revenues, so small that you can't see it on this graph. The general fund revenue report. Keep in mind the even benchmark for the first quarter of the fiscal year would be 25%. General property taxes are at 5.59%. This is normal for this time of the year and will increase as we approach that December 5th deadline. Other local taxes are at 24.51%. Permits and privilege fees were down slightly. Certain stormwater fees have been slow to start the fiscal year, but we will monitor that as we progress further in the fiscal year. Fines and forfeitures is at 16%. We did increase the budget for this revenue item for this fiscal year, so we will continue to monitor that as we get further into the fiscal year. Revenue from money and property is at 36%, primarily driven by interest earnings of $54,000 for our general fund. Charges for services is at 35%. This revenue is up because the first quarter is a busy season for Clear Creek and our Parks and Rec departments. Miscellaneous revenue is at 46%. The total budget for that category is $689,000. Of that, $280,000 is the payment from BBU that has been received, so that's what's driving that miscellaneous revenue percentage up. Recovered costs is at 14.68%. This will trend low for most of the year to the general fund loss of the Commonwealth Attorney Federal Revenue Sharing Funds that are no longer allowed to be reimbursed to our general fund, and insurance that was paid directly by the schools, so we didn't incur that expenditure, so we will not have that revenue coming in. State revenue is at 26%, federal revenue is at 24%, and other financing sources is at 13.61% and is made up of the CDB transfer for code compliance work. This is what our general fund expenditures look like, how the city's money is spent. The actual expenditures are shown in the bigger graph, and for comparison purposes, the composition of the general fund budget is shown in the smaller graph on the right. Of general fund expenditures through September 30th, 26% was public safety, which makes up 28% of the general fund budget. Education was 18%. It is 12% of the budget. Debt was 13%. It is 8% of our general fund budget. Health, welfare, and social services was at 13%. It makes up approximately 16% of the budget. Public works was at 7%. It makes up right at 10% of our budget. Parks, recreation, and cultural was at 5.4%, and it is 5% of the budget. Government administration was 4.76%, and you can see on the budget graph that's about 5% of the budget. Judicial administration was 4%. It makes up 3.83% of the budget. Transfers were almost at 3%. They make up about 6% of the general fund budget. Non-departmental was 2.78% of the budget, and it's at 1.77% of the budget. I'm sorry, and non-departmental was 2.78% of what we've spent so far. Community development was 1.99% of expenditures, and community development makes up 2.55% of the budget. So the general fund expenditure summary, Keep in mind, for the first quarter of fiscal year 19, if all expenditures were even, the benchmark would be 25%. Government administration is at $610,000, or at 20.91%. Judicial administration, a little over $400,000 at 19% of budget. Public safety, $3.7 million, 23.98% of budget. Public works, $1 million, $20.23%. Health, welfare, and social services, $1.8 million, or 21% of budget. Education was at $2.6 million, or 38.12% of budget. This variance is due to the timing of state funds for the first part of the fiscal year. SOQ funding is the primary source of revenue sent by the state. As we get further into the fiscal year, this will even out as the state incentive funding begins to come from the state. Parks, Rec, and Cultural was at $776,000, or 24% of budget. Community Development was at $684,000, or 48.88% of budget. This variance is due to pass-through payments to American Merchant in incentive payments for taxes received, and then we paid for the economic forecast that the state reimbursed. So this entire variance in community development was offset by revenues. Non-departmental was at $286,000, or 29% of budget. Debt was at $1.8 million, or 41.54%. Keep in mind that the city's general fund pays the majority of its debt in 2 months, July and January. That's why that percentage is up. Transfers, $423,000, or 12.87% of budget. So total expenditures for our general fund, $14.3 million, 26% of budget. Our financial data graphs. Fiscal year 16 is shown in blue, 17 is in orange, 18 is in gray, 19 is shown in yellow, and the current year, fiscal year 20, is in red. Local sales and use tax, you can see we are up from 17 and 18, but down from fiscal year 16 and fiscal year 19. Consumer utility taxes are holding steady. Cigarette taxes are up from the previous years, as are lodging taxes, up from all years reported here. Restaurant meal taxes are also up across the periods. Our target revenue report. Local sales and use tax has a positive budget variance of $19,000. Consumer utility tax is trending on budget. Taxes on records has a slight negative budget variance. Cigarette taxes have a positive budget variance of $13,000. Lodging taxes have a positive budget variance of $182,000. Restaurant meal taxes have a positive budget variance of $156,000. The electric consumption tax is trending slightly below budget. Admissions tax is trending on line with budget estimates. Communications tax has a slight negative budget variance. Total positive budget variances of these that we monitor monthly for significant changes, $364,000. It's important to note that most of the positive budget variances come from sales tax, meals tax, and lodging tax. Transitioning to solid waste, revenues of $2.4 million, 30% of budget, expenditures of $1.7 million, 22.47% of budget, for a fund surplus at September 30th of $625,000. It's important to note here, and you'll see this as we go just a little bit further, that that surplus is made up mostly, entirely of prior year cash carryover. At September 30th, the city still had over $498,000 in bond proceeds from the November 2016 bond issue. Just to update council, these were expended in October 2019 for the new liner. Disposal revenues were at 26.76%, collection revenues at 23%, non-operating revenue was 64.49%. Once again, this is made up primarily of the cash carryover for the liner, $352,000 total of which was accrued, and $300,000 from fiscal year audit, and some small prior debt savings that are used to offset current year solid waste debt. Disposal expenditures, we're at 51% of budget. Now, the budget here does include the liner expenditure of $1.8 million, so that is what is driving that percentage up. Disposal expenditures actually paid to date through September 30th, we're at about 10% of budget. Collection expenditures, we're at 23%. Debt expenditures, we're at 50%. Keep in mind that debt is almost 1/3 of the entire solid waste disposal fund budget. Okay, here is the information on the city's upcoming debt schedule. I had been asked by members of the Finance Committee to present this information quarterly so that decision makers and the public sees this information regularly. This is citywide general obligation bonded debt. It is backed by the full faith and credit of the City of Bristol. The first column was the debt service at the time of the fiscal year 18 refinance. What you can see in the first two columns is that the citywide bond payments will increase from $5.389 million to $7.679 million over the next couple years. The following column is the shortfall. Then detailed out is the refinance savings and how that will be used in the current and upcoming budget cycles. So that gives us a net payment, of which a portion of the $1 million annually budgeted for reserves will have to be used at that point to pay the debt. Then as the revenue sharing payment expires, those monies are going to be used toward the debt escalation as well. Then unexpended debt service reserve funds that council committed back in June of 2019 will also be used to offset these escalating debt payments. So what this schedule is really telling us is that under the current debt service budget plan, the plan funds the debt service into fiscal year 2023 with just a small additional funding needed there. And this is the city's current plan toward the escalating debt payments. Here's the cash summary for the September 30th balance. The operating cash balance was $13.4 million, $581,000 from the fiscal year 18 refinance savings budgeted to be expended in fiscal year 20. $407,000 is prior year carryover budgeted to be expended in fiscal year 2020. $240,000 is from the fiscal year 18 liner accrual. $112,000 is from the fiscal year 19 liner accrual. And then in the 1920 budget, we rolled over $300,000 of that cash balance. So those monies will be expended in fiscal year 20, taking the cash balance, the operating cash balance, down to about $11.8 million. Just want to remind council that there are committed funds that are currently in CDs, $1.4 million in the emergency reserve, and a total of $1.794 in the debt service reserve, the majority of that for the general fund, a small piece for solid waste. This graph shows the city's cash balance at month end. The gray line is the current year, the orange line is fiscal year 19, and the blue line is fiscal year 18. You can see the trend here. Keep in mind, this is the balance at month end. It does fluctuate during the month, but these are the reported reconciled balances at month end. So it does vary during the month here, but you can see the curve. Until the December 5th tax date approaches, the city's cash balance does decrease overall from June 30th. So council, what is next? The audit is wrapping up. Audited financial statements will be presented to council in the first meeting of December. Once those final balances are presented, the Finance Committee will discuss policies, including those policies related to funding city reserves. Policy recommendations will be presented to council in January for approval. We anticipate at that time council will review and decide what to do with amounts related to or above reserve levels. We are currently working on the capital improvement 5-year plan, which we anticipate the city manager will present in January, and we are working on the fiscal year 21 budget. This concludes the presentation of the quarterly financial data. Thank you, council.
All right, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or comments that we want to hit on while we're on this?
Well, I do have a question. That one slide was showing the decrease in electric and communication. Do we know what's driving that?
A lot of that is based on the fact individuals no longer have landlines, and that seems to be one of the driving factors.
Okay, that's on the communication. What about the electric? What do you think the driving force of that is?
Hold on.
Right there.
The electric consumption tax. We're down $1,200, and you're talking about the electric consumption tax, right?
Yeah, I just noticed that electric and communications is dropping.
That electric consumption tax is a very small positive, negative budget variance for the first quarter. So I don't have an explanation other than that it's not abnormal for those types of variations. We'll continue to monitor that as we get further into the fiscal year.
Okay.
So, Ms. Bradlin, I will say some of the bright points while we're still staying on this revenue slide. Obviously, the sales tax and the restaurant tax, but especially the lodging tax. You had targeted for $325,000, and it looks like it's over $500,000. So, what do you attribute? What happened?
Normally, the lodging tax is on a curve, and I've sometimes present that information to council. I didn't include that there. It will decrease during the year, some, especially around the December, January months.
Right.
So it's not abnormal to have a variance, a larger positive budget variance heading into that. But clearly, lodging taxes are up in the city of Bristol.
So just for this quarter, maybe, because you know that, because I remember that from last year, you knew it's coming, so maybe you just kind of lowballed it a little bit, but they are up though from last year, obviously.
These, the targets are the annual figures divided by 12.
Okay.
So we would expect going into the low curve, we would be up somewhat.
Does anybody have anything else? All right, next is the consent agenda. Looking for a motion and second for action on the consent agenda.
I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, motion is made by the Vice Mayor and second by Mr. Farnum. Clerk will call the roll, please.
Farnum.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes, we stand adjourned.